Okay, so welcome to the webinar, Get to Know Your Archives and How It Can Help You. My name is Matthew Lyons, and I am the Drexel University Archivist. In this presentation, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to how what an archives is, and particularly how it's different from a regular library. Also looking at some of the basic functions of an archives, different kinds of archives that we have here at Drexel and beyond, and some examples of ways that people use archival materials in research and in teaching. I'm going to have a time for question and answer after the presentation, and I would just recommend that people put questions in the chat, and we can come back to them later. Okay. To start off with, let's clarify what an archives is. There's a lot of different definitions, but one that I especially like is this one. An archives is an organization or department that collects, preserves, and shares records of enduring value. Let me spell that out a little. An organization or department. Some archives are standalone institutions, while others are part of a larger organization, such as a university or a museum or corporation. An archives collects, preserves, and shares records. Our work can be thought of as having three stages. First, we gather materials. Second, we preserve them. We take care of them for the long term, not just for short-term use. And third, we share them. We publicize them. We invite people to come and use them, because the whole point of collecting materials is to make them available to people. The last part of the definition is records of enduring value. First of all, records may refer to documents, images, emails, video recordings, a lot of things, but generally not works of art or artifacts such as you might find in a museum. And enduring value means things that are worth keeping for the long term. Materials that will be useful and interesting to people not just next year, but in 10, 50, or 100 years. That doesn't necessarily mean that the records are old, because history isn't just about what people did in the past. People are making history right now. Now let me say a little more about what's distinctive about an archives and what sets an archives apart from a regular library. First of all, an archives has a specific collecting scope, which sets the parameters of what we take in. That scope might be defined in terms of a specific institution, such as documenting the history of a university, or a specific geographic region, such as a state or a city, or even a neighborhood. Or it might be defined thematically, such as the history of science, or nursing, or LGBT communities. And many archives have a collecting scope with some combination of these elements. Second, archives generally focus on materials that are unique or rare. That might mean a one-of-a-kind letter or photograph or scrapbook, or it might mean copies of a student newsletter that was printed in small numbers, most of which weren't saved. Third, because our collection materials are unique or rare, an archives generally doesn't allow them to circulate. You can view our materials, maybe in our reading room, maybe online, but you can't check them out or take them home. The fourth point is that archives generally manage our materials in terms of collections rather than individual items. For example, if somebody gives us a set of photographs, we don't typically catalog each photograph separately. Instead, we catalog the whole group of photos as a collection. And we might say, this collection comes from the Jane Smith Photography Studio. It contains about 5,000 prints and 3,000 negatives. It has a date span from 1925 to 1960. And the photographs are predominantly portraits with a few landscapes and house interior shots. Depending on the collection's size and complexity, we may subdivide it into sections that we call series and subseries. And each of those series and subseries will have its own description. The last distinguishing feature of archives I want to mention is that we put a big emphasis on context. Context in the sense of provenance, meaning where a particular collection comes from, the person or the department or the organization that created or assembled it, and context also in the sense of how the materials were organized by whoever created or assembled them. Because knowing where records came from and how they were organized can be very important for helping us understand those records and how they were used. Okay, now I want to explain more concretely some of the main functions of an archives, starting with collecting. There are several ways that archives collect materials. At Drexel University Archives, we receive transfers of institutional records from other departments within the university. And we also receive donations of collection materials from individuals, such as students, alumni, and faculty members. Some other archives also acquire collections through purchases, often from professional manuscript dealers. And some archives will accept collections as long-term loans. In all of these different instances, it's important to have good documentation of what the materials are, where they came from, and any agreements involved. After we receive a collection, an archives may do a number of things to help preserve that collection and make it easier for our researchers to find and use. These tasks are lumped together under the term archival processing. Specific processing tasks vary depending on the needs of the collection and other factors, but I'll give you some examples. To help protect a collection against deterioration, for physical materials, we may transfer them to acid-free boxes, folders, and other containers. And for digital materials, we probably want to move them off of portable media such as CDs or USB drives onto a server. Processing may also involve arranging and labeling a collection so it's easier to navigate, weeding out duplicates and extraneous material, and creating a collection guide, which we call a finding aid, to give researchers information about what a collection contains, who created it, how big it is, and so on. A finding aid can be just a few paragraphs or hundreds of pages in length, again, depending on the collection size and complexity, how much time we have to work on it, and other factors. Providing access to a collection starts with putting the finding aid online so that anybody with a browser can find it and find that we have it and get some sense of whether it's likely to be useful to them. To use the actual collection materials, a researcher will usually need to come into our reading room when that's an option, or contact our staff to make other arrangements. At university archives, we've digitized a significant fraction of our physical collections, but only a small amount of that digitized material has been placed online so far. In general, when you're dealing with archives, don't assume that all of the collections are available on the web. If there's something you're interested in and you don't see it on the website or in the digital repository, ask the staff. Providing access also includes answering rights and reproductions requests from people who may want to use collection material in a publication or on a website or in an exhibition. Another important function of archives is education and outreach, which can include everything from physical or online displays of collection materials to hosting class visits, to panel presentations, videos, and webinars such as this one. Now I want to say a little about the specific archival units here at Drexel and beyond. And I'll start with my own department, Drexel University Archives. We are part of Drexel University Libraries and are located in the basement of Hagerty Library. We are the official repository for the historical records of the university, with the exception of the College of Medicine, which has its own archives. Our collecting scope starts with official university records, materials created or collected by university offices in the course of doing business, from the Board of Trustees and the Office of the President on down. We also collect other materials related to the history of the university, such as the records of student organizations, memorabilia compiled by students, and academic and research files of faculty and former faculty. And we collect certain kinds of scholarly output from the university, including graduate theses and dissertations, and books authored by Drexel faculty and staff. We also collect materials documenting the history of Anthony Drexel's family and affiliated families, ranging from a travel diary written by Anthony's father, Francis Martin Drexel, in the 1820s, to letters, photographs, and scrapbooks by various of Anthony Drexel's descendants. And we also have a collection of a few hundred rare books, some of which are from the earliest decades of movable type printing in Europe in the 15th century. These are works that were acquired by the Drexel Library and later transferred to the University Archives when it was created about 20 years ago. University Archives is not the only archives at Drexel. I'm aware of 4 others, and I'll say a little about each of them. As I mentioned, the College of Medicine has its own archives, which is located on the Queen Lane campus and is called the Legacy Center. It's a separate archives because the College of Medicine has a distinct organizational history. It's descended from 2 medical schools, both founded in the mid-19th century, that merged with each other and then eventually with Drexel University. These were Women's Medical College, which was one of the first MD granting institutions for women in the world, and Hahnemann College, later Hahnemann University, which originally taught homeopathic medicine. So the Legacy Center holds institutional records from the College of Medicine and its predecessor institutions, including their earlier programs in fields such as nursing and public health, as well as other materials on the history of women in medicine and the history of homeopathy. The Academy of Natural Sciences has an even longer history. It was founded in 1812 and only became affiliated with Drexel University in 2011. It maintains its own library and archives, which holds institutional records and other materials on the history of science. The Robert and Penny Fox Historic Costume Collection is part of Drexel's Westfall College of Media Arts and Design. It primarily functions as a museum that collects and displays articles of clothing and accessories, but it also holds a few archival records related to its collections and the history of fashion. Lastly, the Drexel Audio Archives, also affiliated with Westfall College, mainly consists of audio recordings from the former Sigma Sound music recording studio in Philadelphia. If we look beyond Drexel University, there are dozens of other archival institutions in the Philadelphia area, which I think are fairly representative of the kinds of archives you're likely to find across the United States. Most of these can be grouped into 4 general categories. First, academic archives. Many of the other universities and colleges in the area have 1 or more archival departments, which may focus on institutional records or may have thematic collecting interests, such as the Urban Archives that's part of Temple University's Special Collections Research Center. The Urban Archives is a major source of documentation on the history of Philadelphia. There are a number of governmental archives in the region, ranging from city and county archives to a regional branch of the National Archives and Records Administration. There are several archives affiliated with religious denominations, such as the Archdiocese of Philadelphia's Catholic Historical Research Center and the Presbyterian Historical Society, which is the official repository for the Presbyterian Church USA. And there are quite a number of independent archival institutions, such as the Science History Institute and the Independent Seaport Museum. At Drexel University Archives, we have information about most of the archives in the region and personal contacts at a lot of them. We're happy to advise you about other institutions that may have resources helpful to you and help put you in touch with them. Now I want to give you just a few concrete examples of how people use archival materials. The examples I've listed are all based on actual experiences that we've had at Drexel University Archives with users. First example, students might come in to use architectural drawings of campus buildings to see how the buildings have changed or to develop their own ideas for possible building renovations. Another example, faculty or staff members might come in to do research on the history of an academic program, maybe to help in writing a history of the program for an anniversary. They might use old course catalogs or reports or correspondence from our holdings to see how that program was founded and how it's evolved. Instructors have brought class groups into the archives to look at design elements in some of our rare books or periodicals. Students have come in to view videos of old fashion shows as a window into changing fashions, which you can also see by browsing through old yearbooks and other publications. And one of the most common types of requests that we get is from children or grandchildren of alums asking for information about their family members who attended Drexel. If the alum graduated, we can usually find them listed in the commencement programs, which will give their year and degree and major. And even if they didn't graduate, the alum will often show up in the yearbooks, which may include a photograph and information about student organizations they were part of or extracurricular activities they were involved in. Again, these are just a few examples to illustrate some of the variety of requests and a few of the ways that archival materials can be used. I've covered a lot of information, so let me close with some key takeaways. An archives collects and preserves both old and new materials in various formats for long-term use. Archival collection materials are unique or rare, so they don't circulate. You can find collection guides and digital records online, but you're only seeing part of what an archives has. So for more information, talk to an archivist. Drexel University Archives has collections on the history of the university and on the Drexel family, and we have information about many other archives on campus and in the Philadelphia area. And lastly, there are a lot of different ways you can use archival collections for scholarly research, in teaching, and for personal learning and enrichment. Okay, so that concludes my quick introduction to archives, and I am happy to answer questions. And I'm going to take this off of share, stop share. Okay. So, all right, a thumbs up from our participants.
Thank you. That was really nice. Very informative.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, if any of our participants has questions, then that's fine. Otherwise, we can just close the session. That's also fine.
No, yeah, I just came to make sure everything I thought I knew about archives was kind of in check, and Simon had reached out and told me to check in, and I did. So thanks for going over that.
Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate your support. Any surprises in the presentation?
I guess I have such a very narrow-minded way of how I work with archives and how I, as a professional staff member, work with archives. So it's always interesting to hear what the other people come to you for, to use it like for classes or for their own research projects. And those aren't things I normally think about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, um, it was there were a lot of different kinds of examples I could have drawn on, and I could easily have also included examples of people coming for research they're doing for a publication for a Drexel serial or something like that. So anyway, yeah. Well, I think why don't we close there, and again, thanks for coming, and this is going to be available, so please let other folks know that it's available for them um, to watch at their leisure.